Today we're going to be doing a review of more than 2 years of patient access to medicinal cannabis in South Africa. We're going to be reviewing interesting patient stories and the indications for which cannabinoid therapeutics are used. With the opioid crisis continually getting out of hand, I think it's really critical for physicians to considering botanical medicines like cannabis for indications. In addition, do patients prefer using oils or flower? And when using flower, do they do standard combustion or look at cold vaporization? In addition, we want to tackle the question, is there a tolerance buildup that occurs while using cannabis? Well, a lot of this is going to be answered today in our interview. I hope you enjoyed. Hi, today we've got Dr. Anton Janssen van Rensburg and Craig Ludwig on to discuss the progress of medicinal cannabis and its rollout in South Africa for the roughly last 2 years. And it's quite an interesting success story, but I'm going to let Craig and Dr. Anton unpack that a bit. Hi, guys.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Good, awesome. Excellent. So I think maybe let me throw the first question to Craig because, I mean, you've been quite active in the industry, pushing with Intracan in collaboration with cannabis clinics about recruiting more physicians and clinicians into the network and, really driving the access to patients locally in South Africa for medicinal cannabis. How long has that been going on for and how's it been tracking?
Thanks, Jeff. Actually, this month is a milestone month for us. It's been 2 years since patient zero was prescribed their first medicinal cannabis product. And I thought it would be very opportune for us to have a conversation with Dr. Anton, who's a leading cannabinoid specialist doctor here in South Africa and has been instrumental in changing patients' lives with the introduction of medicinal cannabis as a category. So, Doc, I think it would be great to hear from you in terms of some of the patients that you have been dealing with over the last 2 years. And for us to hear some of the success stories. And I know, Jeff, you've got a number of questions to ask there, and I'm happy to jump in as and when required.
No, awesome. I think let's jump straight to the success stories because I think that's what ultimately convinces physicians to look at this more seriously. I mean, with the FDA approving Epidiolex, cannabinoid therapeutics are taken seriously, but it's always difficult to get that marketing authorization in the region and seeing the use of flower and oil extracts. Let's jump to Dr. Anton. What success have you seen from the in the trenches, on the ground with patients?
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, it has been a little bit more than a 2-year journey for me, 2 years with patients. And before that, I started developing courses to train doctors in the field of medicinal cannabis prescription. I think I would see myself as a normal South African medical practitioner. I was skeptical to a point. I could see the research was good, but you still have to do your own thing. You still have to get that patient zero yourself or your first group of patients. And now that I'm 2 years down the line, I can honestly say that I haven't seen this type of reaction to a botanical or to a phytonutrient like I've seen with cannabis. When we teach the doctors and also the lay public how this plant has about 500 medicinal components and that microdosing is a thing, it really is. The things that I've seen, and I think, we'll obviously go through different conditions today that I can share about, but pain obviously is the big one. And when I say pain, people need to remember now that in South Africa, you need a Section 21 approval. It's a Section 21 application that has to go to the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, or SAPRA for short. And their unit is sharp. They read what we send them. So this is not something that is a quick script and there you go. And so the conditions are very specific. You can't just prescribe this for any condition. So pain, if I can start at a point here, and then Jeff, you can just guide us through the process. But I think pain is the most relevant thing to start with because so many people have pain. Some of the statistics in the westernized world is that more than 20% of adults suffer from some form of chronic pain. And this could be an old sports injury, this could be an old motor car injury, or just whatever injury that never healed properly that is causing chronic pain. You speak to your above 50-year-olds that say that it takes so much longer to get up in the morning. So they start remembering the sports injuries that they forgot about. And most of these patients with chronic pain will tell you in clear terms when their chronic pain medication has started causing a problem. It's just not a good thing. Many of these medications, like especially the opioids, are highly addictive and they're actually dangerous. The commonly prescribed anti-inflammatories cause numerous side effects, particularly the gastrointestinal system. But this is the big complaint that these chronic pain patients then come to us doctors and they say, but what can we do? And just yesterday, I had a specialist physician contact us for the very first time, urgently needing a solution for a chronic pain patient. He wants to prescribe something now because the patient is in absolute excruciating pain and the patient's already on anti-inflammatories, on all kinds of other analgesics and muscle relaxants and the patches and the this and this and this, that. The patient's not better, but now the patient also has to deal with the side effects of all this medication. And this is where we then come in. We prescribe product that comes from overseas, and there are more and more local, there's more local product coming online. All of these products have to be approved by SAPRA. It's very important to remember that now. And we then prescribe, we prescribe drops, low temperature inhalants. Very important what I said there, low temperature inhalants like vaporizers, like dry herb vaporizers or fluid vaporizers. And so let me tell you a story about a patient. So I treated a 45-year-old male, came to see me, probably it was in the region of 2 years ago. And he had suffered from neuropathic pain on his entire torso, front and back, severe burning pain already for 8 years. At that point, this person was literally suicidal because none of the specialists, and he had seen neurologists, rheumatologists, and eventually they referred him to a psychiatrist, which is a bit of a slap in the face, to tell him, maybe there's something wrong with your head, because none of the medications were working. And this was a debilitating pain that was there every single day. And I prescribed for him a CBD dominant oil to use morning, lunch, and supper. And I prescribed a 1-to-1 CBD to THC, which is a way to describe, it's an easy description, although it doesn't describe all the cannabinoids that are in the product. Remember now, CBD is a cannabinoid, and there's 150 of them. And within 2 weeks, this patient contacted me and says he doesn't want to jinx this now, but he's starting to feel a little bit better. I said, you know what, just keep building that dose, keep building that dose. And he got his life back. It was, and I'll be very honest with you, if a patient like that comes to you 8 years and this long list of impressive doctors that he has seen, you think to yourself, sure, is this going to work? And this patient 2 years down the line is still taking his cannabis oils and he's still able to work because he's not high or anything like that. People, that's other misconception. We're microdosing here. We're not making patients high. We're treating their illness. So I think that's a good story to start with.
So let me jump in there perhaps, because you mentioned the opioid crisis, and this is clearly it's kind of been big pharmaceutical, and I'm in that space. They like to give a recommendation, get medical scientific liaisons to drive that recommendation, and specifically for something like pain as a mainstream indication, this is what you got to go through. And it's fascinating that you are highlighting the fact that this person's been through so many specialists. They've built up a tolerance. They're not getting the pain relief that they would hope to achieve and typically see. And then all of a sudden, the use of a botanical, one that's been around for eons. We've grown up with it. We have the endocannabinoid system in our body. We've got 2-AG and anandamide. So we've got those receptors on CB1 and CB2 that can be, they're prolific throughout the system. And yet we're seeing that there's this massive pain relief. And I keep wondering, if we can start to drive better access. And thankfully, Intracan and the team has been driving access, because if we didn't have this access, this patient would continue to suffer and continue to do more damage through maybe a single molecule compound that's specific maybe for a certain receptor, but we don't know where that full broad spectrum benefit is coming from. And yes, science is tackling it. This is the beauty of it. I think since that FDA approval, we've seen this investment in the science and understanding the mode of action, the counterindication. It's really so exciting to see this. And I'm going to come to the point of maybe let's discuss this tolerance aspect, because firstly, we talked about access, and that's sharply improving. But do you see that there's any kind of tolerance buildup that patients develop with cannabinoid therapeutics, or is it, how does that titration in and out work for the patients?
Okay, so let's start with the titration. So remember now with cannabis, it's individualized medicine. So we start very low, we go slow, and we try to stay low, keep the dose low. So in the 2 years that I've been treating patients, I have not seen too many patients, or actually any patient that's developed tolerance. Why? Because our dosages are low. I have seen patients who are heavy smokers, talking about people that smoke 8 joints a day. I've actually met people like that actually function. This is their way to actually help them to function, deal with their anxiety. I've seen these guys that they do develop a tolerance much faster. So it's also dose dependent, the fact that people develop a tolerance. So at these very low dosages that we use with medicinal cannabis, I have not encountered it yet, no.
Yeah, and if anything, it's a nice break point, because if you are, let's be honest, it's in medicine, you've got to be trying different things, and in a regime, cannabis can be a good offset for maybe breaking a bit of tolerance on an existing product and then allowing them to kind of alternate. And I think that's the good use of science. And now we talked about access. For me, the question here also comes, and maybe this is for Craig, in terms of responsible sourcing, the thing we do want to see is, we don't want to see any problems develop. Any adverse reporting that gets reported to SAHPRA and slows down this rollout. I don't think it's possible at this point based on global trends. We look at the German market, over 100,000 medical patients. We look at Israel, over 100,000 medical patients. Even Guam, which is just like a territory within the US, has over 100,000 medical patients listed. The cat's not going back in the box. It's fully out there. And I think we need to kind of do what even TGA has been doing, which is enabling better rollouts. How's the rollout been going? It's been improving, but is it one where you're starting to see, let's just call it discerning consumers and patients starting to realize, I'm drawing a lot of benefit, but I would like to know what's in my product?
I think that's very important in terms of giving patients peace of mind, is that the product that doctors prescribe comes from medical facilities in terms of access control, air control, light control, no pesticides, insecticides, etc. So the standard of medication and the quality of medication is aligned over time. So a dose today could be exactly the same as a dose in a year's time, based on the controls that are in place. So Betty's brew around the corner, holds nothing to what medicinal cannabis actually holds for the patient. The other key thing that we believe drives access is education around this category. And we're in the fortunate position that this medication is in actual fact the category itself. So we can talk about the category, which reinforces the medication. And if you have a look at large retailers such as Clicks, they featured a great article on the benefits of medicinal cannabis in one of their club card editions. I think it was in April month. We have an association with Wellness Warehouse, and they're also going to be talking to the category in their upcoming edition of their Wellness Warehouse magazine. We're also embracing conversations with many other retailers around South Africa, pharmacy-related retailers, because we believe that this is a medication that has to go to the masses. It's not one that can be exclusive to a specific retailer. It is all about patient care, and how do we offer responsible patient care through the products that we bring to market and through the doctor network that we have at cannabis clinics.
Awesome, excellent. So Dr. Anton, so firstly, the issue of variability in product sourcing, that's been addressed, that's improving, the quality is in place, it's been approved at an individual level by SAHPRA. Hopefully we'll see better access in terms of not just Section 21, it may improve with registered products in the future. So when patients are a little tentative and they're like, okay, well, do I use it? Do I smoke it? Do I cold vaporize it? Do I use the oil? How do you talk them through it? I imagine you have maybe some experienced patients and some nascent patients where, they might be a little scared of smoking, and for good reason. So maybe unpack the cold vaporization versus combustion, and then following that, maybe the difference with, say, some oils as an option.
No, that's such a good question. So it's such a relevant issue for my patients. Remember now, many of my patients are over the age of 50, and many of them come from very conservative South African backgrounds. And how I explain this to them, and I think this is where the whole concept of burning something like in a cigarette versus you can actually heat something to create a vapor. And that's the big difference. So from a cigarette coal that burns at 900 degrees to a proper vape that you get from a vape shop that burns at 450 to 500 degrees Celsius, all the way down to a low temperature, or what they sometimes call a cold vaporizer. I mean, so some people call it that, where we are dealing with temperatures far below 300 degrees Celsius, usually below 250 degrees Celsius. So we're not burning the plant. We're not creating pyrolytic compounds that are problematic, that could be carcinogenic. So we do that with two things. Firstly, an oil that comes from literally laboratory type facilities. And these oils do not contain the perfumes that you would find in a vape or the propylene glycol, the carrier substance. It's just pure cannabis oil that is then slightly heated to create this vapor that the patient then inhales. I explained to the patient that it's nearly like an asthma pump, but you're not going to inhale straight from the thing. You actually have to learn how to sip on it like a straw. It sounds strange that I'm actually have to mention that because my patients literally are smoking naive, so they don't know how to get the smoke from this thing into the vapor. And then you get dry herb vaporizers. I mean, anybody that listens to us now can literally just Google dry herb vaporizers, and they were astounded how many different dry herb vaporizers you can find, and nearly all of them are temperature adjustable. And so then we guide the patients in that. But now to the second part of your question, who wants to inhale and who wants to do what? Usually I've got a smaller percentage of patients who have then tried smoking before and it worked for them. So I'm going to use an example of a patient here quickly. It was a multiple sclerosis patient of mine who came to me and said, "Doc, I can't walk." So she's got bad MS. Her legs don't function anymore. They're literally in spasm and shaking most of the day. And then she said, "But Doc, if I take a few drags from my Zol, then I can walk again. But I don't want to buy or get the Zol from all these unknown places," which I told her, well, that's a really good idea to stop getting it from unknown places, because you don't know if someone's laced it with something else to get you addicted. So we did a whole application for her, and she decided to do a vaporizer oil. And it did exactly the same for her than what the smoking the joint did. She would take 1 or 2 inhalations and the spasticity would stop so much that she would walk around the house for 2 hours and just need to take a few inhalations. That's the easy part. Then there's my chronic pain patients, or even my patients with cancer pain, where it's actually convenient to have a vaporizer together with my oil. Probably my most convenient prescription is that someone takes an oil, breakfast and supper, sometimes a lunch dose as well, and that they have, when they have breakthrough pain, it helps me as a prescriber, but also helps the patient, that they have this little vaporizer pen in their pocket, and if there's breakthrough pain, that they then take this vaporizer. And when I've explained this to my patients, they usually don't have a problem with it because they understand the concept of the low temperature vapor. So that's how I approach it.
So I'm going to jump in there. I mean, you made a good point there, talking about the mode of action and the delayed onset. And I think this is good because, I mean, oils are useful if you, like you said, in a chronic condition, or you know how to schedule and titrate that out to kind of modulate the experience over the course of the day, over the course of a week, a month. But when you have breakthrough pain, I mean, a vaporizer is very attractive because it deals with the issue instantaneously. And this is why often the opioid crisis gets out of hand, because people take another one and they take another tablet. And at least this way,
that's right.
It really helps because, and the nice thing, and I like this about vaporization, is that because the terpenes are quickly degraded at, like you said, a 900-degree coal. You know, terpenes, we know about the entourage effect, which is all these terpenes have a massive impact on the overall wellness and experience of the user and patient. So therefore, that cold vaporization doesn't just immediately flash off those light hydrocarbons. It lets it kind of get into the system, get aerosolized, get taken in, and in a way that's not degradative or dangerous that we often see. And not to say, like, I'm not here to say, you know, pyrogenic smoking is terrible. There's a lot of benefits and all the rest, but it could be better. And if it could be better, then we should definitely address the mode of action and delivery. So absolutely. I mean, I'm a big fan of what you just said there. And I mean, I can see how the oils are being combined nicely with a vaporizer to really facilitate, good pain management. And we talk about pain, but MS you've mentioned. What are some of the indications besides pain? We talk about inflammation a lot as well. What are some of the things you really see in the recommendation going forward, not just locally, but maybe from, if we look at Israel, we look at the States, what are they recommending the use of cannabinoid therapeutics for?
Yeah, so in South Africa, like you said, pain is important. Then all the spasticity or movement disorders like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, things like that. And the other indications that we have in South Africa is seizures that are treatment resistant, that's a SAPRA approved condition, and then cancer related problems, particularly cancer pain, and then also nausea. I just want to quickly mention nausea. This is very important. THC has got a profound effect on nausea. I recently treated a end-stage cancer patient who was so drugged. Her family approached me and said, "Listen, our mom's in the last few months of her life, and we cannot even speak to her because she's so drugged up to try and get rid of the nausea and the pain." And what we then did was, the medication was anyway not working, all the opioids that she was taking. I put her on a stronger oil that has THC because now I'm gunning for the nausea, and I put her on the vaporizer. I mean, she was a Germany's wife. She had never come close to a cigarette in her entire life, so it took a bit of coaching for her to do this. We got her nausea under control in less than 5 days.
Wow.
We obviously did a bit of a faster titration, and she was fully compos mentis, there to spend time with her family in the last 3 months of her life. That really was a story, and her family was so grateful that she had meals, she had an appetite because the nausea was just gone. So these are the big conditions. And then obviously, Jeff, when we look further, the research that's being done, and now this becomes very interesting because now we start looking at the research on depression and anxiety, mood disorders, because and I know doctors don't know this because I did not know this 4 years ago, but the endocannabinoid system has got a profound intertwined nature with the receptors where serotonin and dopamine and these neurotransmitters are involved. That's why, yes, we are seeing effect in patients with depression and anxiety. We're seeing effect in children with autism. The Israelis are leading the charge when it comes to autism. So, how long is a piece of string here? They're literally looking at it's being tested for any possible condition. But in South Africa, we are limited with SAPRA based on the best possible research. So in time, I think we're going to be able to expand our repertoire.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. And this is what's always been a challenge with cannabinoid therapeutics is, it's so good at treating comorbidities. And yet, when you look at a clinical context, you try to avoid patients with comorbidities entering into a clinical study. And that makes it difficult because it's such a wonder plant. It's got so many phyto components in there that help, from the terpenes, the flavonoids, the cannabinoids. Like, it's just like a miracle plant. And it's great to see that it's being widely accepted, it's being used. I like the point you raised about that end of life for terminal patients, because that is often distressing to see that, someone is basically drugged up for those last few weeks, months of their life, and they don't really have the quality of time with their loved ones. And I think this is the beauty of something like using a botanical as an alternative. There's no harm in trying to assess, exactly, can we move away from certain opioids, an overdose of certain things that just detract and keep someone in almost a zombie state. And I'm using the word very loosely, but, someone who's drugged out. Whereas, that quality of life, especially of a loved one, you can't get back at that final stage. So I love that you mentioned that. And I think this is the beauty of what we've seen with botanicals. And for depression, there's so much interesting things happening with psilocybin, ketamine. There's a whole plethora of products that, MAPS in the US is driving this across the line with MDMA even. So I'm expecting this idea of, depression-related psychotherapy and treatments to really catapult the industry forward. And at the end of the day, how you feel impacts your life, and it impacts your health.
Absolutely.
And what better than using, if cannabis just makes you feel better by itself, it's already impacting your health and your mental state. So I love that idea. I wanted to ask a question as well in terms of have you been really surprised? Like, was there a patient over the last period where you were just completely taken aback by, they just came back and said, wow, I really did not expect this, and you didn't even maybe expect it, but you're starting to see these unknowns because we're still figuring out how everything works together. So has there been any big surprises in this last period?
Oh, absolutely. It's very difficult to just single out one, but I'll single out one or two maybe. And it has a lot. Well, besides the fact that this patient who had so much nausea was already completely amazing, the short period of time that it started working. But I had a female patient that actually approached me with severe chronic pain. She'd been suffering for 10 years, and the cocktail of high schedule pain medication that she was on already was surprising and impressive. I did not know how someone's liver and kidneys were dealing with what she was taking. More than one opioid dosages per day, several other anti-inflammatories per day. Like it was a daily, like every 2 hour, every 3 hour thing. And I think on top of that, just to smooth things out, she was taking something like 8 grandpa powders on the same day as well. And so when the patient approached me, I didn't know what I should do first, test her liver and prescribe the cannabis. But either way, I prescribed the cannabis. And it was we did an oil and we did a vape. We did the oil and the vape combination. And as per SAPRA, I can prescribe 6 months repeat, and the pharmacy delivers once a month, every month. And when the patient came for her 6-month follow-up, she actually went quiet a bit. And I thought, maybe it didn't work, but it gets very busy at the clinic. And at 6 months, she came back and said, can I please have my next prescription? I said, well, we need to just have a look at your dosages of grandpa powders to start off with. And she had weaned herself off every single pain medication in that 6-month period. She was taking one anti-inflammatory on occasion as she felt necessary. Literally, the treatment had completely transformed this woman's life. After 10 years of going down a very, very toxic route, and actually self-professed being fully addicted to opioids. The first day of the consultation, she told me, I am fully addicted to this stuff. No one knows how to get me off it. So the doctors, they literally did not know what to do for her. So they had to keep on prescribing. And this woman weaned herself in 6 months. And she's still on cannabis, and she still has not relapsed into that cocktail of drugs that she was on.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that's exactly what we hope to see if you look at the opioid stats, it's ridiculous. And if you think about the toxicology and the damage to the liver, the kidneys, the organ systems from opioids and just continued abuse and overprescription and overuse, I mean, it makes so much obvious sense that, botanicals has a massive place to play. Because, I mean, what did people do before Big Pharma was around? How did they manage their pain? And there was pain. I mean, people were chased by tigers, lions, fell off cliffs. There was far more exposure to physical distress and trauma. So there had to be alternatives, and they were using those alternatives. And it's great to see that.
That's why.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's why in some of the ancient writings in India that they discovered from 1000 BC, people said that there's a guardian angel hidden in the leaves of the cannabis plant.
Absolutely. I'm still waiting for, that traditional use in India to find its way into a more formal economy. And on this point, I mean, Craig, you guys have been driving hard. We talked about ease of access. Just give us a quick update. I know we've mentioned it in the past, but your collaborations with Clicks and Arrie pharmacies, it's not that hard anymore. I mean, if a patient hears this video and they're like, I want to try this sounds like I'm abusing opioids right now. It's not. I can see where this is going to hit me in 5 years, 10 years down the line. I can see the damage I'm incurring, or I have a loved one that I can see this is happening. We know about Intracan and cannabis clinics to, be able to get access. But what's the convenience factor? Because you don't just walk into a Clicks directly, at the pharmacy. It's not at that level yet, but it can still be very convenient with, delivery.
Absolutely. And with technology playing a major role in all of our lives, the ability for patients to have a virtual consult with a cannabis or cannabinoid specialist doctor is certainly there. All they need to do is visit cannabisclinics.co.za, register as a patient, and go through the process of a consultation with the cannabinoid specialist doctor. And as Doc mentioned, it has to be SAPRA approved. And once we receive SAPRA approval, Clicks Direct Medicines, Arrie or Greenways Pharmacy will then deliver the medication directly to the patient's home, or patients will be able to collect in store. And most certainly other retailers are looking at getting into this category, but as most retailers do, they have a merchandise critical path of when they list certain categories or items, and also understand their marketing impact as well. So we're in conversations with all the major players, and certainly from a patient point of view, it's important that they approach the retailers that don't currently offer the dispensing of medicinal cannabis and actually challenge them on that and saying, why aren't you doing that? Because at the end of the day, it's a medication that has to be available to all South Africans.
Awesome, fantastic. And Doctor, I'll maybe go to you for a closing remark in terms of cannabis education. I mean, I remember at varsity, I had a lot of medical student friends as well, and my question was always like, I never heard the endocannabinoid system discussed, and increasingly we're seeing this becoming a more, I mean, this is why we do these videos as well, it's to create awareness, and I think it is a hot topic because of stigma. But I think that we are starting to, year on year, get to a point where, in the next decade of cannabinoid therapeutics, it's going to be very exciting. In terms of the educational space, I mean, is there advice you want to maybe give other fellow clinicians, physicians about, looking into this, understanding the systems a bit better, and, there is limited risk. I mean, no one's really technically died from cannabis. I mean, we're not referring to maybe the overexposure of pesticides or heavy metals. That's not documented. Why should physicians consider this besides everything you've just listed right now?
I think it's about safety, and it's about having, within that sphere of safety, having an effective and safe option for numerous conditions. That's why. And many of the clinicians already follow me on social media. And whenever I do training and education, my training and education is free. And I announce it. I announce when I do my next course. For example, on the 25th of August, 2022, I'm going to be doing another course, which is open to members of the public as well, because I believe in educating the layperson and the professional all at the same time. But this category of medicine is such an elegant, safe option for the doctor of the century that we're living in.
Awesome, excellent. That's perfect. So, Craig, Ludwig, thank you so much. Dr. Anton Janssen van Rensburg, appreciate you coming on, discussing this, hearing from, a doctor specifically, because often people are not willing to talk about it, and it's great to actually have a medical professional on and to see the supply chain supporting that on this discussion. And thank you again for coming on to highlight the access for the last 2 years of medicinal cannabis in South Africa.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Awesome.